Warning. Listening to this show may result in increased levels of inspiration, motivation, and innovation. Side effects can include the immediate urge to take massive action to build a better business and life for yourself and others. You've been warned. Welcome to Influencers Radio with your host, Jack Mize.
And welcome back to another episode of Influencers Radio. The good old days of school fundraising. It's something I think we all have memories of, whether our own childhood or what our kids are bringing home for their schools these days. You know, parent-teacher groups raise more than $1.5 billion every year, selling everything from candy to coupons to wrapping paper. The recent study found that 71% of parents said they've sold fundraising products to friends, family, and coworkers. 35% of schools average from nothing to $5,000 in annual earnings from fundraising, while 21.1% earn more than $75,000. Well, the value of fundraising, a nationwide survey of more than 1,000 principals conducted last spring by the National Association of Elementary School Principals, revealed that almost all schools in the United States raise funds to pay for classroom equipment and supplies, along with important extras such as playground equipment, field trips. While most principals report that they would rather not have to raise funds, 87% believe that fundraising provides valuable returns. Well, my guest today is Kim Freid, and she is an expert in school fundraising, helping elementary schools around the nation raise much-needed funds while building character and leadership amongst their students. Kim, welcome to Influencers Radio.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, I'm really glad for you to be here because I think what you're doing is really interesting and another just fantastic for students, just in the way that you combine that what a lot of parents and principals seem to dread is that school, that fundraising, but actually turning it into an opportunity to, enrich the lives of the kids that are actually out there raising those funds. So I guess what I'd like to start out with talking about here is school principals. Fundraising probably isn't on the top of their things I love about my job list, I would imagine. So what's changed? What is it that you're doing to help this and change this from what we think about typical school fundraising?
Well, the problem is that so often in the past, school fundraising had become kids selling things that really either they had no interest in or that really wasn't that great of a thing for them to be promoting. For example, as a mom of 7, my kids are never really big proponents of wrapping paper, yet we were asking them to go out and sell wrapping paper and trinkets. And, then on the flip side of that, we hear often about the challenges with childhood obesity, and then we're asking our kids to sell tubs of cookie dough and candy bars. And so I think for me, I realize the funds are much needed in the schools. And I realize there's things like art and PE classes being cut all over the country because of budget crises. And so as a parent, I want my child to still be able to have those things, but I'm faced with the challenge that then we've got to find a way to fund it. And so fundraising is kind of a necessary thing within schools, but I just really feel like it's important that they be done in a way that enriches kids, as you've said, and that helps kids. And so that I feel like is the much needed change in fundraising, is that we find a way for kids to raise funds while building them up.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't realize exactly what they're raising money for. When they're, and I agree with you with the candy. I remember when I sold band candy, and I think my parents end up writing a bigger check for me eating it all than I actually sold. But maybe we can establish that one that it's not just to raise extra cash for the teacher parties, right? It really does do some genuine good. Can you talk about what those benefits and advantages of fundraising are right now today in schools?
Sure. So the things that we're seeing funds be raised for are playground equipment, upgrading that, or even updating it, shade in the common areas, smart boards so that the classrooms can keep up with the technology that's coming by way of the curriculum, and even like marquees for the front of the school. You walk by some of these schools, or you drive by some of these schools, and you see the parent volunteer on the ladder with the magnet stick trying to stick the letters to put the messaging up for the school, when there's wonderful electric marquees that schools are raising funds for so that they can change the message. And it's a really great way to communicate. Parents are so busy, they're not reading every email, but they are dropping their kid at school every day. So if they can put some of that important messaging on the marquees, and so often we're raising money for things like that.
That brings up a point. I mean, I didn't even think about that with the smart boards and you kids probably don't even know what a chalkboard is anymore, do they?
They really don't.
But yeah, the digital boards outside, that's amazing that they're still, doing that manual, changing those signs. So it's clear that there's definitely a benefit that directly benefits the kids when it comes to fundraising. So you talked about and you said mother of 7. Oh my gosh. Doesn't that make you legally insane? I think that's one of the, but when it comes to that, and disappointment when you see, the wrappers and the candies and things like that. What do you see? What are the best type of fundraisers for parents are most likely to buy into and actually be excited about and encourage their kids to participate in?
Well, I believe it's important, as I said, for the fundraiser to in some way build up the kids. So if it's connected to activity or, fitness, that's always good. If it can be connected to character or leadership or some type of development in the child, then that could be good. My favorite types are fun runs or thons, like a readathon, something where, we're not asking them to go out and ask Grandma and Papa to buy cookie dough. We're asking them to go out and tell Grandma and Papa what they're learning about. That's going to be an important thing to incorporate into their life and raise funds in the process of doing so.
Well, those are definitely, fundraisers with purpose. And I could definitely see getting behind something like that because you see even bigger benefit than just raising the funds. Certainly changed from when I was a kid, when, you'd raise money by having the principal kiss a pig. I guess there's not a lot of character building in that, or you don't want to go home and tell Grandma and Grandpa that, and here, give me some money so my principal will kiss a pig. So when you do that, I'm sure there's, cost and some accountant breaks down everything in the background. Do you see there being a cost advantage in those types of fundraisers versus, selling actual goods that have fixed cost? And I'm sure the profit margin is different in a lot of those. Does that come into consideration at all?
Yeah, I do think that comes into consideration, and just the value that your school is getting above and beyond the fundraiser. To me, that's the most important. It's not just the assembly, the sale, and then, the counting the money. It's that there's value add all throughout the process of that fundraising process.
Well, I know when, we hear about the fundraisings and a lot of the grumblings that you hear from parents about the fundraising noise and things like that. I'm sure that principals get the brunt of that, but also fundraising is really organized by volunteers, the parent teachers groups. Is that correct?
It is. Definitely, I would say that the PTA type organizations are the ones that are normally spearheading that. And then all the parent volunteers that come up under them, whether it be the classroom parent or just the general PTA board. But yeah, I think that they do the lion's share of the fundraising. The principals clearly got more important things to be dealing with on a daily basis, but at the same time, they desperately need those funds to keep up their school classrooms. And even for the teachers, I really love the idea of having the teachers benefit from the fundraiser. So, maybe it's that the first 10% raised in your classroom will go directly to you to be spent on your classroom how you see fit. Not only does that speak to the teachers and get them a little more excited versus, we're going to be using some of our class time and we're going to be having to get involved in collecting things, and then we have no idea where this money is going, but we know that we're still spending our own money as a teacher on reading rugs and iPads and things like that. Whereas if you are to incentivize them by giving a portion of it to them to spend on their classroom how they see fit, not only do the teachers get behind the fundraiser, but the parents are a lot more excited knowing that that money is going to directly impact their students' classroom in a way that the leader of that classroom thinks is best.
Oh, yeah. Well, that can definitely, incentivizing, I know that can be a double-edged sword that people think, fair. That always seems to be the big word in schools. But I can definitely see that would be an easy measurement. I'm sure the measurements of that are easy to read too when you do that kind of thing. So that gets teachers on board with fundraisers. So the volunteers, pardon me, a lot of people don't realize how much work some parents actually put into these organizations. And I've seen it, and it's almost like a full-time job for a lot of them. And I can see how it could be, easy for them to get burnt out. What are some ways that to keep those volunteers excited and seeing, the advancements and the benefits of what they're doing? So how do we avoid burning out those volunteers?
Such a good question, and probably one of the most important points in fundraising, because we rely on these volunteers to make these things happen. And if we're not smart about them, I remember I once volunteered for a school carnival, and it was something where they were throwing ping pong balls in, and trying to get them in the jar, and then they got a prize. And I gave up 4 hours of my day, and that meant 4 hours of being a part of the carnival with my kids. So it was a bit of a sacrifice. And because it wasn't well thought out, and because the prizes weren't very exciting to the kids, I tallied that we raised about $20 at my particular booth during that carnival. Now, there were plenty of other things going on, but for me to think that I just raised $20 for the school, not counting whatever the cost of the prizes behind me were, I was not excited that the value of my time equated to about $5 an hour that day. And quite honestly, I'd rather just write a check at that point. And so I think it's really important that you recognize the value of the time that you're asking volunteers to put in, and really think carefully about which types of fundraisers you're going to do, and make sure that they're getting the biggest bang for the buck. I consider myself to be a philanthropreneur, which means I really like to volunteer and to give back, but I'm also an entrepreneur. So I'm a little bit financially minded in how I'm going to do that. And I want to make sure that I'm not, wasting my time trying to help the school raise $20, for example, that day. So I think the most important thing when you think about your volunteers is to make sure that the things you're asking them to do are organized, that it allows them to be a part of what they're doing with their children, and that it promotes community amongst the day, not, having the kids out there with one parent while the rest of the parents are behind trying to raise a small amount of money.
Well, I think what you just said probably raise the ears and eyebrows of a lot of parents listening to this, in that I think we've all, anybody that's been involved with this has experienced that school cook-off, the odd, unique idea for school fundraisers, and when everything's put into Excel, everyone probably thinks, well, I would have rather just wrote a check than to go through all this to do that. So I think that's going to be of a real interest to a lot of people. Do you see that happening a lot? Because I've seen it so much. And is that something that's frowned upon for those parents that just want to write a check? And I'm sure there's other, fundraising, I guess you'd call faux pas out there, and maybe you can discuss some of those. But I do think that that's one of the biggest ones is seeing the dollars and cents and realizing that it would have been just easier to write a check.
I do. I think that so many groups get caught up on, do we want to bring in people to help because they're going to take a percentage of it, when in reality, the percentage they're taking is to cover the work that's being done. And that's really not the part they should be thinking about. They should be thinking about the part that the company that's going to come in and do this are the professionals. They do this week in and week out. So they've already figured out all the challenges and the problems that go with it and the ways to be most efficient, which in turn means your school's probably going to raise a significant amount more of money. And don't get caught up on the fact that the organization you're working with might take a certain percentage, because you actually might earn considerably more than the percentage they're taking. And the true benefit is going to be that your school community isn't doing all the work that they really aren't experts at doing. So you talk about faux pas. I think that's definitely a faux pas. I always say I'm not a huge cook. And so when I make brownies, I always say I'm going to let Betty Crocker do the hard part, and I'm going to add the butter and eggs, because sure, I'm going to pay a little bit more for those ingredients that are in that box, but it's tried and true. She has perfected it, and Betty Crocker is who I want representing my brownies on the table. I don't need all the credit for that when I don't, I'm not really a stellar baker. So it's kind of the same idea, is to bring in the experts who know what they're doing, and that you're going to get a considerably better product, which means usually a better return.
Well, so that brings up something I really wanted to get into is, where you come in. And make this better, and kind of how that works. Can you walk through what it is that you're helping schools do to not just make the fundraisers more efficient, but also how you are getting the kids involved, and you're actually making this a character building process for them?
You bet. So I started out as a parent volunteer, and I got put in charge of fundraising. And I had an organization come to me that was called Apex Fun Run and say, we'll put on this whole fundraiser for your school and we'll do everything. And so I took it back to my board and said, hey, I really want to do this. It sounds like a great idea for our fundraiser. And as the chairperson of the fundraising committee, this is what I think we should do. And they were like, oh gosh, I don't know. They keep a percentage, and that the fun run has always been our biggest fundraiser. And so they nixed it. They voted no. And I did the fun run that year with a few parent volunteers. And I can honestly say, I remember that year sitting around my kitchen table with a bunch of moms while our husbands watched the Super Bowl. And we sat there and did, the envelopes and the template letters and put everything together and ordered all the things. And we probably, I would say combined, spent about 300 hours putting together this fun run. And it was our biggest fundraiser of the year. I think we raised a rather small private school, but I think we raised about $16,000. Well, the next year I said, listen, I really want to try this company. And as a parent, I'm willing to make up the difference. If once they take their cut, we come out less than the $16,000, I'm going to give to the school anyway. I'll write a check to make up the difference. We've got to try this. And so that was enough to, I basically put my money where my mouth was, and we tried this company. And not only did we raise more, I didn't need to write any additional check to make up the difference, but we sat with the teachers the next day and they raved about the fact that just the programming that took place on the campus during that 2-week program was worth every single bit of the fundraising dollars, and that had we not raised anything, they would have still been happy. And so what that looks like is we go in for a 2-week program, and really what our hearts are behind at Apex is that our hearts are behind leadership and character development. We know that in the world today, it is such a needed lesson for kids to continue to be built up and enriched in the areas of character and integrity and leadership. And so that's really what our passion was, but no school has a budget for that. So we could have created a leadership company, but there's no school that's going to have extra money for that, being that they don't even have money oftentimes for PE, art, or smart boards. So basically we said, okay, we'll fund it by having a fundraiser go alongside that will completely facilitate the details of. And so we go in and we teach a 2-week leadership and character development program. And at the end of each leadership lesson, we give a fun challenge to the kids to make them think outside of the box of who they could get pledges for a fun run, because at the same time, we're also promoting fitness and activity and those kinds of things. And so basically, the kids are getting pledges throughout our leadership and character development program. And then at the end, we blow up tunnels and build a track on the field of the school. And we have shade tents and water stations and DJ. And we basically run the entire fun run. So that is the time that we have the parents come. They come one day of the whole program and they help us count laps. And they're out there cheering on the kids, having fun, and knowing that an incredible amount of money is being raised. And so in the end, we've got kids who have learned some important life lessons and raised an incredible amount of money for their school.
That's just brilliant, to combine those two. That's the efficiencies it seems like is missing. And from so many of these types of programs, it just really is remarkable. So, and in essence, it pays for itself, right? Just in your example, it seems like a no-brainer. Is there any downside? If so, what could it be? Because, like you said, this school said even if they raised no money, they would have been thrilled with the program.
Absolutely. And I can say in 10 years of doing this, we have never had a school walk away with less money than they could raise up on their own. Yet they've still got the character and leadership lessons tied in, and they haven't had to use nearly as many parent hours. And so, to me, it's a no-brainer, but you still get some of those parent groups that are just a little bit caught up on the percentage that's going to go to the expert company that, knows what they're doing, has all the systems in place, has the back-end technology, which is really something we should touch on, is the power of the technology in reminder email. So if a child puts in all the emails of the people or phone numbers, if they think text is a better route for their audience, they put in the information and it sends a message saying, "Hi, it's me, Johnny, and I'm raising money for my school and I'm learning about character and leadership. And I was wondering if you would pledge me for my upcoming event." And so that's great. Kids can do that if they're doing a program on their own. They can make that call or send that email. But we have a system that's then going to send a reminder to anyone who hasn't pledged, and then one more reminder the day before the event. Well, that technology alone doubles what a school is going to raise. Because let me ask you, how often have you been asked to support someone in a fundraiser that you have to take the initiative to do it on your own and you think, I'll do that later, right? And it just doesn't happen because we all get busy and we all have our lives. But for me, it's usually that third reminder that I'm like, oh, snap, it's tomorrow. I've got to get this done. And so that's when I go in and do it. Well, without those reminders, and you don't have a school community that has a process in place that's going to get those reminders out. So just little things like that, that make working with a company so much more powerful because, again, they're doing this every single year. They're making their system stronger and better from the things they learned the year before. Whereas when you're doing it as a school, you're doing it once a year. you're working with new volunteers every year. So some of the mistakes that were made end up getting repeated. And, the value of using an expert is just really, it multiplies what you're going to make and takes away the work.
Well, yeah, you've certainly you got it down to the precision. It's just really remarkable to me. Mm-hmm. One of the things I'd like to bring up, which may be a little bit controversial, but to me, I it's beyond me why it's controversial, but it's well, think about it. You talk about these kids making, recordings and the kids' involvement of this. And not to be derogatory about kids or anything like that, but, kids of that age sometimes have a hard time getting their head wrapped around the benefits of the fundraising. And it's just human nature, especially that age, for what's in it for me, right? And one of the things that you do, which is controversial, and again, I don't understand why it is in a lot of ways, is that you actually recognize the top achievers in this world of where, everybody gets a trophy, the participation, which I think works sometimes, but I think competition is just extremely healthy for kids and just about anyone. But you actually recognize the top achievers in your fundraising. Can you talk about that and, some of the obstacles that you have to navigate around that, if any, and what you see the true benefits of that are?
Sure. So I would say that most parents in an elementary school setting see the value in offering a reward system for kids as they're putting in effort to their fundraiser. But sometimes it is controversial and people, think that kids are being left out who don't have resources. And from my own personal experience and childhood, I wasn't an academic scholar and I wasn't always the longest jumper or the fastest runner. And I wasn't the person who could spell the most words. And all of those areas in elementary school are recognized with a ribbon or an award. But what I was really motivated and I was very competitive. And so when it came time for the annual fundraiser, I was often the kid who was outselling the other kids in candy bars or whatever. And so I personally believe that that's a gifting that I've been given. Everybody's been given a different gift. We teach our kids this every single day. And so I personally think that kids who excel in this area should also be recognized. They're probably going to be the salesmen or women of the world. And so why not recognize them for the gifting that they've been given? And so we do that at the same time because we recognize that some kids can be left out. And we also recognize that not every student in the school does have the resources to go and get pledges. And that is sad to us. And we never want a child to feel like they aren't part of the program because they aren't able to get pledges. And so we do a lot of things to make sure that it's all inclusive. For example, each day when we teach a lesson, our lesson one day this year is Aspire and how you reach for your goals and your dreams and you aspire. And we teach that lesson. And every single student, regardless of whether they're participating in the fundraiser or they're getting pledges, they get a rubber bracelet with the word Aspire on it. And then the next day they get the next bracelet. So everybody is getting to be a part of the leadership and character. But then we have additional prizes or rewards, we call them, for people who reach a certain pledge amount because they're the ones that are probably out sending the most emails or really taking the fundraising part to heart to help their school raise money. And so we have a reward system for them as well. And I think that's so important just to recognize kids. And of course, as a mom of 7, I don't ever want my child to feel bad or left out, but I feel like we have done a really good job and that it's important when you're doing a fundraising activity or anything like that in your elementary school to make sure that everyone has a chance. But that also those who kind of go above and beyond can be recognized for that effort because it's not always just the kid with the rich mom that's getting those prizes. It's the kid with the work ethic to go and meet the challenges that are being given to them to raise money for their school. And it's important that they be recognized for that.
Well, I certainly commend you for coming up with that, because it is it just the whole system is just seems just remarkable, the way that you put this together and how it benefits from all sides. I have some notes here that I made that I'd like to circle back around with some of the things that you talked about. You talked about your the school when you first did this, and you talked about being a small private school and the money they're raising. Is there a certain size of school? What size of these organizations? What do they need to be for you to go in and help them, or how big of an organization is needed to actually run a successful fundraiser?
That's a great question. So our primary market is elementary school, so your K through 5 or your K through 6. But as those PTA parents have moved on from the schools that we've worked with them in and taken their kids to middle school, and it's usually the same parents who are the parent volunteers or the PTA presidents within the middle school, and they said, what do you have at this level? And so we've put into place programs for middle school that are just a little less elementary, I guess you could say. And then now we even have parents who are the top fundraiser or in charge of fundraising for their kids' club soccer team or basketball team. And so now we even have put in some simple on. Those don't necessarily have the character and development, but what we're competing with in that market is there are so many companies who it's kind of like a GoFundMe, where the kids will reach out and say, hey, will you sponsor my basketball team? Can you donate money? And we just, as a character and development organization, we just don't really love the idea of teaching our kids to ask for money without doing anything in return. And so what we've done is we put together programs around the particular activity that they're raising money for. So, for example, if it's a basketball team, we'll do a hoopathon. And we'll say, can you sponsor me for every basket? I'm going to shoot 100 baskets. The average made is 30 on my team. I'm hoping to make 35. Would you sponsor me for every basket that I make? So instead of just saying, can you give me money for my sport? We say, we're going to do something in return. We're going to work hard and get as many baskets out of 100 as we can. And would you sponsor me for every basket that I make? So to answer that question, our primary audience for Apex is elementary schools. However, we now, by popular demand, and I don't say that lightly because we literally had parents begging us for programming and really to use the back-end system that has the reminders built in that lets the kids just enter in the email and it kind of takes over from there. And then they get to go focus on what they're working towards, whether it be basketball, swimming, football. We've worked with Boy Scout troops, lacrosse teams, you name it. We always say, if you can think it, we can fawn it. So any age group, we can help.
Well, that's fantastic, because that's what I was thinking about, some of these organizations that were a little bit, extracurricular activities, but are definitely worthwhile, the youth sports and things like that. So, that's good to know that you are able to help folks like that. And circling back to, the technology, the back end, the systems that you have in place, and you had mentioned that, a lot of parents or potential donors, they have the intention of donating, but things just kind of slip through the cracks, which is something that you solve. Well, what do you see as being the easiest way for donors to give? Because I think the days of, the kids coming to the door to sell something and here, I'll be back for a check, or can you just do this? And that's where the things slip through the cracks. What do you see as the easiest ways for donors to give?
Well, definitely, and especially, in this post-COVID climate where everything has gone online, I just think that the online donations are so powerful. People get to do it from the comfort of their living room. They're not having to exchange money or checks. And so definitely having the possibility for people to donate electronically using their credit card or that type of avenue is the best. And then that also reminds me that it's really important that there be an automated system for the donors to get their tax deductible donation. And so that kind of goes hand in hand. That then becomes electronic and it's just automated. As soon as the donation's given, the receipt is given. So nobody has to worry about the end of the year and providing receipts and all that jazz. It's just to have it be automated is really, really a critical piece.
Well, yeah. So speaking of with the COVID pandemic, I'm sure that's changed fundraising tremendously, or at least that would be my perception of it. What do you see as being the biggest obstacles or maybe misconceptions about fundraising during COVID?
Well, this is something that has even surprised me. Obviously, when schools were shut down, it was very, very difficult. We did have a virtual program that kids were doing from their living room. We were still doing the character and leadership development. And the beauty of it was that parents were actually getting to hear those lessons and see that this is really rich content that their kids are responding to. So that was really awesome. But there was, some decrease in funds given because there just wasn't that same excitement that was happening when the kids were interacting with team members and meeting the people teaching them that character and leadership face to face and accepting the challenges. However, now that we're back in school, I think the biggest misconception is that people are still thinking that we've got this challenge of fundraising because we're still kind of in a COVID climate. And the reality is we're seeing a 30% increase in fundraising in the schools that we're working with nationwide right now. And I'm saying not 30% over last year where there were decreases. I'm talking about a 30% increase in the numbers they were raising in 2019. And so while people are like, oh, I don't think we're going to do it, we're just, getting back into our routines after COVID and we don't want to tap the parents. I think the parents are more eager than ever, and not only the parents, but outside of the community, knowing what teachers have gone through in the past 18 months and knowing what kids have gone through, they are so eager to get behind these kids and support them in any way they can that we are seeing huge increases. And I think it's an absolute misconception that this is a tough time for fundraising. It's actually a better time than ever because people see the value in schools. And they see the value in teachers, and they want to support and give to that.
Yeah, well, that's just amazing. The contradiction of what you would think. You'd think that it would just drop off so much, but just the fact that they're able to do that and see that kind of support is. It really is amazing. I got one more question I have about, because you talked about the fundraising efforts and how all this stuff has increased. What is there a sweet spot for how many fundraisers? I'm sure there's a point where you can burn everybody out, the givers and volunteers and everything. Is there a number of fundraisers, or can there be just one big one throughout the year? What do you see as being the optimal?
So we have seen so many schools that do 10 fundraisers a year with this goal of raising $1,000 each. And I don't think they mean to. That's not the goal they set out at the beginning of the year, but kind of to hit their number, it takes 10 fundraisers because they're doing all these restaurant fundraisers or book fair fundraisers that are all well and fine. But I really believe for the sake of your volunteers, for the sake of your teachers, and for the sake of your students, to do no more than one per semester is really critical. Otherwise, you just end up robbing Peter to pay Paul. Half the families are going to do this one, half the families are going to do that one. And if you promise your community that you're going to do one in the fall and one in the spring, you're going to get a much better return and have a whole lot less work.
Well, Kim, it's certainly, you can hear your passion behind this. And the people that are lucky enough to look, to not get down into, well, how much is this costing and where's this money going to, and just seeing that the overall benefit is just so much bigger than selling a candy bar. It's one of the reasons I truly do consider you an influencer, because the impact that you're having on, not just the communities, but the kids, their lives, and all the lives that they touch. I just want to, thank you so much for coming on and sharing this.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's hard to hide my passion for it. I get maybe a little too excited, but I really think this is such a much needed thing for elementary schools to be able to raise the money they need to give our kids the best opportunities they can have. And tying character and leadership into that, to me, is as critical as math and reading. So thank you for having me. I really, really appreciate your time today.
Oh, well, how can people find out more? If people want to get involved, how can they find out more about Kim Freid and the types of help that you can offer and how they can take advantage of that? What's the best way for them to connect with you?
Well, they can go to our website, which is apexleadershipco.com, and they can also reach me at Kim Freid, I before E, except in Freid, Kim Freid at apexleadershipco.com.
Fantastic. Well, we'll definitely have the links to that on the show post. Again, Kim, thanks so much for coming on today.
Thank you.
Folks, there you have it. Definitely check out Kim Freid, KIMFREID. We'll have the links there on the show post. Until next time on Influencers Radio, remember, you are the only real game changer.
You've been listening to Influencers Radio. To get all past shows and updates on future shows, visit influencersradio.com today.